even if it's controversial and there's many people who will, throw me out of the room for even saying this, the main changes I would say is the seller cannot leave the account because they close the logo. And I think the CSMs are going to have to become very, very business focused, maybe even have an upsell number. I don't think there's a single person in go-to-market that can have a role that is not directly tied to having a sales outcome. Everybody is a seller.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Bravado Pod. I'm your host, Sahil Mansuri, and today I am super excited to welcome my dear friend, wine aficionado, Indian tech sales leader extraordinaire, Sangeeta Chakraborty, who is most recently was the CRO at Miro. Hi, Sangeeta. Welcome to the
Hey.
Bravado Pod.
Hey, Sahil. Great to be here.
Oh, so happy to have you. I guess, I want to start by letting you introduce yourself to our audience. You share a little bit about your background. I'll probably have a couple follow-up questions on that before we launch into today's topic.
All right. Hey, everybody. Great to be here with Sahil. My name is Sangeeta, as Sahil mentioned, and I am a go-to-market leader. I love working with customers and selling them amazing solutions. Been in the SaaS space for way more years than I want to admit, and have sold a lot of, mostly with startups, and then I tend to get acquired by big companies, and I try to get out of that, and then I'm back in that cycle again. Sold enterprise SaaS for a while, consumption SaaS, PLG, SLG, and just really am a sales nerd and just love being in the space.
Amazing. You've worked at some really blue chip companies in your career, Checkr, Okta, obviously Miro. I guess, one thing I have is, and you've also spanned across working both on like the post-sales customers, CSM side, as well as working on the pre-sales and then both. As you look across your career, what have been the most fun, exciting moments that you've had and where have you found your like real sweet spot?
So the thing to know about me is that I am extremely customer obsessed and I look at everything through the lens of the outside in perspective. And so the best moments in my life have been really when we were in dire straits and our business was in real trouble, the economy was tanking, and we had almost no hope. Like our pipeline wasn't there, we were not progressing, nobody was buying, and this happened to me at least a couple of times. But the example I was thinking of is the housing crisis, and literally nobody was buying, Sahil. And we had an ICP and a product that was selling really well until the situation happened. And then in that middle of the gloom, when we were doing everything, I was doing cold calls. I was sitting next to the SDR, being an SDR myself, because you got to do what you got to do. One of our customers said, "Hey, we think you could do this one other thing with your product." And as a rule, I say no, because I don't want to do anything else. This is my product. But a customer came in and actually showed us a far larger market that we could go after. And if you do that right and find that trust with that customer who shows you the way, that then led us to have the next stage of growth. We eventually sold into VMware. That was super exciting. So those are the highlights of my career.
Innovation being the mother of necessity or pressure making diamonds is a common theme in sales, whether it's the last week of the quarter where everybody's pushing to get deals done, or whether it's bad economic times leading us to make changes to our go to market and be willing to look outside for help instead of being so sure that we know what we're doing, are really common themes that we see play out, especially today as there's been a lot of upheaval and change in go to market. Super interesting. So, Sangeeta, asked you onto this podcast because you have some incredible experience and insight that I think could be relevant to some common problems that we are seeing across go to market today. And so what I find really interesting about what's happened over the last couple of years is that we suddenly have had this massive disruption. Obviously, we had the downturn and then things picked back up, and now it looks like we're kind of back on a growth trajectory. But what I found to be really interesting as we've been talking to sales leaders and to CEOs and founders has been this idea of what is the new benchmarks, what are the new ways we should be thinking about go to market in a world in which pricing is no longer tethered to this like traditional SaaS model. How do I think about quotas? How do I think about comp models? How do I think about success criteria? If your ARR is suddenly not so recurring and is much more, in this AI world, your outcome based pricing or whatnot. I think the disruption in pricing has had some really interesting downstream effects into how companies think about their revenue and their sales team and whatnot. So we started this podcast because there were so many questions out there, and I was basically getting the same question over and over again. And instead of trying to answer them on a one-off, we thought, what if we invite some of the smartest sales leaders who have seen this type of transformation before? Whether it's PLG, whether it's thinking about shifting pricing across industries or new technologies that are coming out. And I thought of you right away because obviously you've touched on a lot of these themes in your career and thought that you'd bring a really welcome perspective on that. So that's really the purpose of this, is for us to think through as we look towards 2025, how does a company think about its go-to-market, especially those that are startups? How do they think about their go-to-market? How do they think about their sales teams? How do they think about the profile of people to hire? How do they think about compensation quotas, et cetera? So that's the main purpose of this conversation. And it's something that I know you've talked about a lot. So would love to start by just getting your perspective on, you obviously at Miro, went through some really big, exciting changes at the company. As you look towards 25 and beyond, how do you see SaaS companies thinking about quotas, pricing, the people that they're bringing on board in this world of AI?
Maybe we start with the people. And we have to think about being sort of outside in from everything is also the customer in the middle of all of this change as well. And how are they thinking about buying? Because that's changing, and they're also trying to figure this out, just as we are, right? So the first thing that I would say is good news is that the fundamentals are not changing. The type of people you need to hire are still the type of people you would have been hiring, because the profile that I think are profiles of reps that are deeply successful, regardless of what happens, are people who are owners. They're owners of the business and have this ultimate accountability. They're almost operating their own little mini business. They're not carrying a quota. They are running their business. And so the people that I found to be the most successful and that I would expect to continue hiring are reps who are deeply curious and have what John McMahon, I think everybody knows him, so it needs no introduction, he used to say PhD. It's persistence, heart, and desire. If you have all those three things, then what I think is the winning combination is that in times of change, they are learning as fast as possible and are going to make that business happen for you. So the thing that you're testing for when you're hiring people are to ensure that you're hiring owners and people that are not waiting for leads to come in. They are not waiting for customers to show up, for the CSM to do certain activities, for their CEO to go and make a pitch on LinkedIn. They are going to do whatever it takes to go find that business and own everything. I mean, yeah, they need help. They do need the leads. They do need help in moving this business forward. But what you're looking for is mental mindset. And usually the founder CEO has it in like massive degree, or they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. But this has to be the CRO. It has to be CRO down all the way into the rep. So the good news is that doesn't change. I think you still have to hire that. In the world where people are now paying on outcomes, so I think it's super early, by the way. I'm seeing a bit of it, but people are still testing. I know like Intercom is famous for this and 11x and some of them. But it's evolution that I think we should have said it, we saw it coming. So it was 25 years ago, perpetual software. You sold an IBM mainframe, you never had to talk to the customer again. Then came Salesforce and said, hold on a second, we're going to do SaaS. Software is dead, we're going to sell SaaS. So now every year you have to make sure the customer cares about what you do and the value, and then became SaaS pricing. Then it was, well, seats are not enough. It's going to be consumption. I'm actually using the seats. So that was the growth of all these consumption models, PLG, whatever, test it and buy it. And now where the customer is saying, but I don't know if I got value. And so this is just part of the evolution we should have expected. And I think the future is here, but we're all trying to figure this out. So in this changing of outcome-based pricing, you could make huge mistakes in how you comp your sales. If you do it the wrong way, you're going to spend all your money paying people that really haven't built a business for you. So the thing that I think we also have to now start to think about is what are the leading indicators we're going to have to start paying on? And how do we actually look at the buying cycle and the life cycle of the customer? Because I think we're still attached to the old mistakes of the past, which is the sale ends when the rep closes the deal. And then the rep can go close the next fancy deal. And they don't have to worry about the customer. That is changing. I think this is where a lot of our go-to-market models are going to be upended.
I want to hear more about that because I think you bring up two things that I think are really closely tied. The first is that which is in the best interest of the customer, that which is preferred by the customer, is always going to win. You know, like the market is going to pull it out of companies. And the idea that when the deal is closed is when we ring the gong, when we pay the commission check, we mark the logo as a closed one, and there's a celebratory moment only works in a world in which you have guaranteed upfront, non-refundable revenue. And even then, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about, we want to renew the customer and like our business model falls apart if our renewal rates aren't high and like net dollar retention. And so like we've already started thinking beyond that, but at least you had that revenue guaranteed. Now, you brought up Intercom. Klarna, I think, is doing this. There's a bunch of companies that are starting to say, hey, instead of charging you $100,000 a year or $1 million a year, we're going to charge you $2.50 per ticket or $200 per booked meeting. And that revenue almost has to be earned every single day. In a world in which that is true, how do you think about building a go-to-market model or a go-to-market structure that can support a customer being able to churn any day of the week? Because if they stop getting value from the product, then they've effectively churned in terms of revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the one concept that I talk about us really needing to put to bed and bury forever is that concept that we have of post sales. And we still have it. Like if you look at any sales playbook, there's a straight line where the customer buys and the line ends there. And then a CSM picks up and it's all called post sales and nobody even looks at it. So all these decks have 80% of a line that says, here's how you close the deal. And then the remaining 20%, some mythical thing happens and you assume that the customer is going to not just renew. Sahil, most of us are doing land and expand businesses, so who's going to do the expansion in this current scenario where the customer is looking at your value every transaction? I think the seller has to think about it end to end. So things that I expect to see upending is the seller moving on because they closed the deal and doing the next thing. I think the sellers will need to remain attached to the account. They will need to stay very, very focused on continuous outcome selling and ensuring that success happens. And the selling doesn't stop when the deal is closed. Then the questions that are going to get raised is, what about the CSM? Do you now need a CSM to do what they did in the past? And I would say no. So what did CSMs do in the past? They took on the account. If it's a
Mhm.
technical product, they were technical, helped you set up. If it was not a technical product, then they tried their best to be useful by showing you how to use the product and doing QBRs from time to time.
Mhm.
Now, you use a lot of products. Which QBRs do you show up to?
None.
None. I don't know who shows up to QBRs anymore because it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time from everybody. So the question that really is going to start to be asked is, what is the role of this continuous relationship person? And I think we've been making a mistake in this for the longest time, where we felt that the CSM cannot be commercial. And if they are involved in helping you upsell, then they've sort of gone against the religion. I truly believe that that's a mistake. And I've tried it myself, where I've had CSMs carry quotas and they
Mhm.
were phenomenally customer focused. Not a single customer came back to me and said, I can't trust this person because they have a quota. They, in fact, like this alignment of incentives. So to me, even if it's controversial, and there's many people who will, throw me out of the room for even saying this because church and state should not mix, I don't think there's a single person in this world in go to market that can have a role that is not directly tied to having a sales outcome. Everybody is a seller. So the main changes I would say is the seller cannot leave the account because they close the logo. And I think the CSMs are going to have to become very, very business focused, outcome focused, maybe even have an upsell number.
First of all, I think that's super interesting and unique as you shared as a perspective. And that's the reason I wanted to get your insights here because you have seen transformative business models at some of the you know most blue chip premier SaaS companies in the world. And so your perspective carries a lot of weight. I'm curious about, let's start with this, with the AE side first. So if you're saying that an AE can't leave an account because they need to stay in touch and continue to deliver outcomes, how does that work in terms of capacity modeling? Because I guess the way that we think about AE capacity modeling is you're like, okay, one AE is going to generate $1 million in new biz in year one, 1.2 in year two, 1.5 in year three. And predicated within that is the fact that they are able to get accounts off their plate. If they are still on those accounts, does that mean that each AE needs to take a smaller number? Does that mean that you need more AEs? How do you think about that?
I think what's going to happen is that A's will need to look at their business as a book of business that they continue to grow, not necessarily get new logos at the rate. And I think it's a nuanced answer. So I wouldn't say this is go blanket statement, apply this at every business. I think it depends on the account segment and the tiering, the sales cycle, the type of deal you're closing. But if you generalize, and I'm generalizing vastly, I would expect that AEs are going to have a book of business, have a fewer set of accounts, but with continuously trying to expand those accounts and get more revenue. And so the growth number doesn't change, the economics don't change. But I don't think that they're going to be asked to go keep closing large logos and moving off because I don't see how that'll be successful. And if this seems very radical, it isn't really because look at the consumption based software. They're doing it already. They can't afford to have their A's walk off. If you're selling like Snowflake, you need the A to be there, making sure the customer continues to consume. So we'll have to take the best of those worlds, look at
Mhm.
what outcome based really means, because this is still new even to the consumption based companies. Understand what are those leading indicators that the AE has to continue driving. And the reason I feel so convinced about this is because I put myself in the customer's shoes. And when I'm buying something from you, Sahil, I don't want you to sell it, celebrate, get a paycheck, and then the next morning, Sangeeta shows up. Who is this person? I trusted Sahil. So they want to have you in the room and stay accountable for what you promised.
Mhm.
Now, the challenges that we'll have to really figure out is how do you scale this effectively? And does Sahil need to do everything that the account needs at this point? I don't think so. That's not where he's great. But he cannot get off the hook. I think he needs to
Mhm.
stay involved in ensuring success happens. And then we bring the right specialist for whatever else needs to happen for the customer to keep getting the outcomes.
How do you think about let's go back to the profile of rep. One of the things that now you've managed much larger and more teams than I've managed over the course of my career. Um, you know, but something that I noticed is that if you were to tell me build a team of 20 people that were excellent at getting the deal closed and then passing it off to CSM versus build a team of 20 people who were not only great at closing deals, but then would stay on with that customer, build a long-term relationship, and be able to continue to service them many years into the future. I think I would look for slightly different people. Like when I think about that in my head, it's not. I mean, the maybe the top five are the same on both sides because great
True.
sales is great sales and great ownership is great ownership. I agree with that. But when I think about some of the people I know who are incredible salespeople who have been at the very top of the leaderboard at many companies I've worked at, part of what they hated was getting stuck into the mire of the account. That was draining for them, and when they were put in situations in which they had to do that, I didn't get the best out of them. Maybe that was my fault as a sales leader. Maybe I just didn't know how to do it. But I felt like that was just not their skill set. That was not their superpower. They thrived on hunting, not farming. And it seems like what you're saying is as companies start to gain more of this consumption model energy into their business, DNA into their business, that maybe that like pure hunter profile of salesperson, I don't know if it changes, but I would love to hear your perspective on that.
I think there's immense talent in the pure hunter mentality. And I do think that that used to be something that we celebrated. But, and many of us have been in companies and have seen companies that had massive bookings, but
Hmm.
not necessarily massive continuous success.
Hmm.
And it's because I think we overly celebrated the early part of landing the customer. And so the hunting instinct doesn't go away. You still have to do all of those hard things you had to do to land the account. But where I would say these reps who are actually very intelligent owners of their business are automatically going to start thinking is they need to understand how to leverage resources at their disposal to continue to stay effective in the next stage. So they may not want to do everything themselves. I don't expect them to, but I think they're going to have to become more effective in leveraging services, CSMs, experts, uh, to stay effective so they don't have to go solve the problem. Like you said, they're not good at it, but they can't afford to walk away. That is what I believe is going to be the evolution of our field.
How do you think about screening for this in an interview process or across a resume? Because one of the challenges that I hear across from both hiring managers and from candidates is this idea that the profile of rep that they are looking for, they're finding a lot of difficulty seeing in the market. And then on the candidate side, they feel like, I'm trying so hard to get a role, but I can't seem to get a sniff in. And it's really difficult to even make it through that, like even get a call back, even get a first conversation. They get on with the recruiter and it seems like they're being filtered out just because they don't have the perfect background or the perfect experience, regardless of their skill set or their ownership mentality or whatnot. Sales hiring has been a challenge for so many companies for such a long time. You've built so many large, successful sales teams. What has been your secret sauce to getting that alignment? How have you managed to, kind of skate through those waters and build world class sales teams, giving people a shot? How do you think about that problem?
So there's a number of questions in that, right? So the first thing, let's talk about what is the sales culture that I found the most effective, and what is the outcome that I'm trying to drive. The outcome that I'm trying to drive, Sahil, is an organization that is the most efficient learning organization in the world. The reason I'm looking for that is what worked in the past in different companies may not work where I am. But I know that if you bring the core learning skill set, then you're going to learn faster than I can even enable you to come back and tell me this is how I could sell. This is what I learned. And so, first of all, it's about building a culture of learning, which means you have to build a culture of experimentation, of massive psychological safety, and let people go and have those tests come back and tell you, I failed at this, or this worked. Let's learn together. And so I would say job number one for us as leaders, we need to do three things. We need to inspire, we need to inspect, and we need to coach. Part of that inspiration are people who are coming here and saying, we are going to build this career together, this business together. If you're hiring reps that just want to, make their quota, they are not going to be successful on the long run. But if you get a rep that says, I want to be the best ever in this and build my best ever career, that means I'm going to come and learn. Those are the people that you want to hire. So, but where do they want to be? They want to be places where they are trusted, that they are given help, but they're able to go and make independent moves to understand how they can sell the best. And then they come back and share that. The best people come back and share that. So first is the culture that you build. And there's tactics on how you can build it, and we can share that if you want to know what the tactics are. The second thing is looking for reps and the interview questions. This is a hard one. I don't think there is this one sort of golden ticket question, but questions that have given me most insights about the person are tell me about the toughest problem you've ever had and how you got out of it. And it doesn't have to be a sales thing, anything in your life. And what I understand there is, what do they think is actually tough? Because you'll be surprised, some things are not as tough, but they think that is the toughest thing they ever came across. And then did they actually have an open mind and take accountability on their own to get out of it? Or are they blaming everybody else, like the coach, the other team, injuries, something else? It's usually a sports problem that I hear. But I learned a lot about resilience and grit and curiosity and that owner mindset. So that's one of my questions. And then the other question that I learned a lot from is, tell me about the deals you walked away from and why, or tell me about the customers you walked away from and why. And here I'm trying to understand, are they intelligent? And what is the framework that they're making for qualifying? Are they doing it in time? And are they thinking about the right customer as well? So, like I said, there's no golden ticket to any of these, but these teach me a lot. And in terms of job hunting, you're right. There is simply more supply than demand right now. And so you have to be super creative and think of yourself as the product, as the old adage. What do you need to do to build your awareness? How can you position yourself uniquely in solving the pain that you're selling to? And if you are talking to a recruiter who doesn't care, it's the wrong ICP for you. So find the right customers, find the right companies that are hiring. Do everything in your power to network, to go and get to people that actually care about what you've got to offer. Take the recruiter calls. I wouldn't say you rule them out. You take every one of them, but don't count on that being the only thing. That's like expecting that all the leads from marketing is going to be helping you close your number. You got to make your own pipeline. So just use those skills that you're really, really good at in landing that next thing.
I love your call out of what it is that people think of as the hardest thing that they've ever faced. There's definitely a connection that I've seen, a correlation that I've seen between folks who have struggled a lot in their personal lives, being able to overcome mountainous challenges on their professional lives, and people who've had maybe an easier path on their personal life, getting stopped. We call it getting stopped. Like at what point do you get stopped versus your ability to just keep going? One quick thing I want to call out, and then I want to move on from this topic, is you mentioned you get a lot of sports analogies around this, and this is something that is a conversation that comes up a lot in sales hiring, which is there's a lot of hiring managers that say that they want former athletes, and they feel like former athletes make the best salespeople or make great salespeople. What's your perspective on that? Do you think that's true? How do you think about that?
Yeah, there's so much to talk about this topic, Sahil. Not to mention that this whole field of sales is obviously dominated by men, and sports is a part of a lot of their lives. So a lot of the analogies you get are sports related, and it's something that I had to actually learn actively because I personally didn't follow as much of the sports as this field does. I strongly believe great athletes make great salespeople, and I'll tell you why. I think the best athletes are the ones that listen to their coaches and effectively appreciated what the coaches sold to them and coached them on. And I haven't yet found a rep who is effective, who's not good at coaching. So it's one of the critical areas. So I do think that great athletes tend to become salespeople effectively because of that. The second thing is great athletes are not lone players. They know how to leverage the team. They're part of the team. They drive the team. And that's the other skill, I think, that, successful reps, I think there's some lone wolves, but most of them really need to be strong team players in building their businesses.
I want to switch tracks and actually talk about something that I think is another common problem that we are seeing in today's market, which is a fear from, well, instead of saying a fear, how about this? There seems to be some dissonance between the way that sales leaders, especially kind of this like new rising generation of sales leaders, want to think about setting quotas and taking on an annual number versus the way that I think it's been done historically. And what I'm referencing is this post that our mutual friend Dini Mehta posted recently, which we will have up on the YouTube channel for people to see. But I will summarize for those of you who are just listening. And effectively, in this post on LinkedIn, she wrote about the fact that she gets calls from like new heads of sales at early stage companies that say something like the following. So I'll read what she wrote. The company has crushed it this year, and now we're going to have big targets next year. Everything I see tells me we do not have the pipeline or market to hit the big 2025 goals. What would you do? And she writes, my answer is you should share your POV on the pipeline and market, study the financial plan, but ultimately get ready to take on the big targets. And then she talks a lot about how you can try to de-risk that, and she talks about, you know, a lot of steps you can take in order to find ways to take on a bigger number. But the thing I find interesting about this post, and this like dissonance that I'm seeing, is that 5 years ago there seemed to be a lack of fear of taking on a bigger number. You know, like if you hit 20 million in ARR, people were excited to try to figure out how to get to 40 or 50 next year. But today, you know, especially after the last 2 years of turbulence and people feeling a little shell shocked by what happened, maybe like hangover a little bit still from COVID days, there seems to be this feeling of like, if we got to 20 and my pipeline says we can get to 30, let's set the number at like 27 and make sure we really hit it or something like that. And it wasn't something that I was familiar with when I was a sales leader, which, you know, again, was kind of in the 2010 to 2017 timeframe. You know, I wanted the biggest possible number. I wanted to go and prove to the world that we could build something exceptional. Today, it seems to be a little bit more playing defense. I wonder what you see in that space, and how, you know, you think about navigating that yourself as a sales leader, what advice you give to up and coming folks, and how they should think through that.
Yeah, it's a pretty deep question, and I think the reactions that you're seeing, Sahil, is and it's understandable because it has been really hard. It's been a hard selling environment, and so sales leaders are not just seeing sort of their compensation impacted; they are seeing morale impacted, and that's the worst thing. Like once sales reps have lost morale, then you're done. So I think the trepidation comes from how do we ensure we remain winners? And that is the question to answer. So, first of all, I think Dini's right. I don't think that the answer is you go negotiate the CFO down and say, hey, I think it should be 27 or 25. And that used to be part of the dance that you played during the planning season. And so there's two people in this situation. There's the CFO. They manage risk, right? Their job is to manage risk, and so they may have multiple scenarios, and they could have the upside scenario, the middle scenario, the low. Let them do their job. Your job is to be the best representative of the business that you possibly can be. First of all, to your first team, which is the leadership team, and then to the company. And so, job number one is to actually understand why the number is being given to you first. And so the reason could be, you know, assumptions that are being made by the board, by the CEO, by somebody else in this business. And so the first thing you try to understand is what has brought us to this situation, and have very deep understanding of the financial plan, to Dini's point there, which is what are the assumptions. Don't let any mysteries in any part of that go by, because those are the ones that are going to come back and bite you. Then I think you have to do two things. You have to have a responsible but still aggressive, optimistic outlook for the number you can hit. And it may or may not be the number you've been given, but you have to go and put the belief that you can go stretch and make that business happen. And that is why you're in the seat. If you're the one who's taking like the least amount of risk, that's again somebody else's job. That's the CFO's job. That's not you. Your job is to take the team up the mountain and show them how to do it and go drive that biggest number possible. The only caveat I would say is you have to explain what the assumptions are that you are going to see throughout the year. and measure very, very carefully through the year. That's the cockpit for you, that you're measuring. These are the indicators that I'm going to drive that is going to get me to the number, and make sure that you're executing maniacally to that. But I don't think your job is to go negotiate the CFO down to a number that feels safe. That is not why you're in that seat. You're in that seat because you can make the promise happen that nobody else could see, and because you're the exceptional operational machine that's going to make it happen.
First of all, I love your perspective, and there's like two things in there that strike the strongest chord with me, which is that if the business is at 20 today and can reasonably get to 30, the ROI of having you in that seat is to go beyond 30, and that's the job, right? If any sales leader with this pipeline and with these expectations and with these numbers can get from 20 to 30, then why are you the person that's in the seat? And I think having to justify that to yourself, not to anybody else. You don't need to justify it to the CFO, you don't need to justify it to the board. You need to justify it to yourself, which is to say that, like, the sales leaders who people want to hire, the Sangeetas, the Deanies, the Sam Blondes, the people, the Stevie Cases of the world, the people who get sought after as world-class sales leaders, they get sought out because they're people who can transform the expectations of what a great business and what a great go-to-market team can deliver, and finding those channels, finding those customer plays, finding those ways of exceeding even the wildest expectations of the business. That's how you make a name for yourself and go to market. Nobody ever made a name for themselves and go to market by getting to 105% of their number. Like that wasn't how it was done. And yet it feels like this gun shyness, and what I really like is this idea of morale that you brought up around the team. I maybe something in go-to-market has changed, and I really want your perspective on this because you have such an important one. But I remember when I was at Glassdoor and when we were at like 30 or so reps, there were basically three reps: myself, this guy named Clay Bentley, and this guy named Jeremy Jackery. And the three of us would bring in somewhere like 75-80% of the revenue of Glassdoor on like a 30, 40,
Yeah.
50 person team. And I never saw that as unusual. I was like, of course, that makes sense. Like, we're the best, and this product is easy to sell. Anybody can sell this product. The other reps just don't know what they're doing. And it felt like we were just playing a completely different game than what the rest of the company was playing, and and that um and that was very common. I don't think that we had a sales team that was demotivated. I don't think we had a sales team that was feeling like we were losers or something. It was a team that was being carried by a small number of outlier performers that were then raising the bar for what the rest of the company should be doing. And here today, I'm not sure that culture is as well represented any longer. Maybe it is, and maybe I'm missing it, but I'm curious how, whether at Miro or in other places, like how you're seeing the culture of outlier performance being represented in a company.
I'm still seeing the outliers. I still see there's those few that everybody knows. They show up to the all hands, to all the enablement sessions. They are paraded at RKO. I think that is going to continue. You're going to have the outliers. But there's now this democratization expectation that
Mm.
everybody needs to hit their number. That's not true. It's never going to be true. And that's not how you set up sales plans, anyways. But there is that expectation that you kind of have to pander to everyone. And maybe that's why there's this risk averseness that is coming up. But I think the old adage of the top few that are carrying the number remains true. And those are the people you want to increase, from top 2 to top 10.
Can you tell me more? You said that's not how sales plans should be set up. How should sales plans be set up?
I think there's going to be some very clear winners that are going to hit it out of the park, and they're going to be people that are not going to make their number. And I feel that in many cases, sales plans are trying to sort of come down to try and give everybody something. And I think it fails because sellers are here because they are risk takers and they are winners, and they don't want to make just something. They want to go buy enough, make enough to go buy their house. And so I think sales plans have to be enough that reward the top performers out of the park. Like, those are the people that are making incredible amounts of money. And then just be prepared that there's a set of number of people that are not going to make it, and that's fine. And they may be in the wrong business.
I You know, it's really refreshing to talk to you in many ways because I feel like a lot of the content and discussion that I see in sales uh, doesn't speak candidly about things like this. You know, there's this whole like in the new world, you know, we need to drive towards 100% from every rep, and there's this like sense of trying to artificially create equality. It reminds me of something actually. That I'm seeing in education, in a very interesting way. This whole model, I started thinking more and more about it because I've got a daughter who is about to go into kindergarten. But she's been on advanced programming for a while, and she could easily test into first grade. But the school district won't allow her to test into first grade because they're like, no, we don't offer advanced programming, whatnot. I had tested into first grade as a kindergarten, so I was familiar with it. So it's, you know, in the school district that I used to go to was in the city of San Francisco, which today would never allow such things to happen. But you know, it's interesting to me. When I was in elementary school, we had a program called GATE, which was Gifted and Talented Education. I heard that the program is defunded now because they feel like they don't want to put additional resources towards the brightest students because they already have the most opportunity. They want to put additional resources towards the bottom students and try to bring them up. And like in principle, that sounds good, right? Of course, like no one is trying to leave anyone behind, but even the very program "No Student Left Behind" probably created the most students who are left behind. And so
Oh, yeah.
like I wonder how much of this, like you called it democratization, you know, or almost like socialism type vibes that are coming into sales, which is maybe the most brutally capitalistic sport profession in the world. Like there just seems to be some real dissonance here. And I wonder if we're going to see some sort of a tipping point on this where companies have to kind of wake up and realize, like, look, there are certain places in which, like, you know, athletics, and I guess, you know, and I want to end by saying I can see the connection to sports now really clearly because athletics is one of those places where if for any reason you don't perform, you get replaced because the team only cares about winning, and if you're not the absolute best at your position, you're going to be out of a job really quickly. But it doesn't feel like we have that culture in at work as much anymore. I think it's still there, and it's certainly there in great sales teams, but there's a lot of sales teams that I feel have gotten soft, and I wonder what you think about that, or sales leaders who've gotten a little soft over the last few years, and I wonder what you think about that.
I will not pass judgment on my fellow sales leaders, but I do see this the lack of interest in coaching is part of the problem because you could coach a rep to be an amazing rep. You'd also coach somebody saying they're not in the right role. And that part just hasn't happened because people don't care about individuals as much as they, I think, need to be. And some of the best advice I've been given in my career have been people that have been saying, look, you're not good at it. You should be doing something else. You'll be more successful doing something else. And I think while we are trying to pander to everybody and trying to make them successful just because they're in the role, I don't think that growth is going to come. I'm all for the growth mindset. I think we need to give people a chance to learn. And then, some people are going to be amazing at it. Let's reward them. And maybe there's something else that the others are going to find out for themselves if we, guide them there.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Okay, the last topic I want to touch on before we end our session today is the topic that you hinted at the very beginning, which is being kind of customer obsessed and being customer focused. And I want to do that through the lens of how we build our sales process these days. And so, you know, one of the things that I think most companies are challenged with these days is top of funnel. I think it's always been a problem, but it's really come to the fore in the last few years because of the decay of the mass email programs that so many companies were reliant upon. And I wonder how you think about top of funnel, you know, for a startup that maybe doesn't have a great brand yet and is trying to claw their way to try to create, you know, get their first 100, 500,000 customers. You know, what would you do if you were starting afresh with a company or a brand that had, you know, 5, 10, 15 clients and not big marketing budget? How would you think about creating top of funnel for an early stage startup?
So I do advise many startups at this stage of their growth. And the advice that I've been giving them, Sahil, is first of all, you have to cast a shadow that is larger than your actual shadow. And the way you do that is you have massive thought leadership that stands out. Because what people are ultimately attracted by is learning something that they didn't know before. And so the question is, how can you get people's attention by showing them something that they didn't realize exists? And this goes beyond just buying LinkedIn ads. This goes to you getting out there, understanding the profile that you're selling into, and becoming a really big part of that ecosystem by showing them something new. It's hard. If you're a Me Too product, you're going to find it extremely hard. But if you have something that's unique, you want to go bravely into that community and say, hey, look, I may be a 22-year-old startup founder and I have a very small company. It just got funded by YC, but I'm going to show you something that you did not know while you were in the business 25 years. The right people will pay attention. And I think that's how you've got to start to do something different than this. But now this doesn't scale forever. So you are talking about a very early stage startup. This is one of the things that I would recommend. And then as you get bigger and bigger, you have to find other ways that are more scalable than just doing founder selling and founder evangelizing.
Can you maybe talk about just the next stage beyond that? So I think thought leadership is something that I can speak to with my own personal journey at Bravado. We when we launched our talent marketplace in 2021, 2022, it was there's a million sales recruiting agencies and sales recruiting products that are in the market. And our opinionated point of view at the time was, yes, that's all true, except the biggest difference is that, none of you have any performance data on any of these reps, and we have performance data on sellers through Bravado. And so we can give you a perspective you've never seen on a LinkedIn profile or a resume. And it captured a lot of attention, and it actually allowed us to win competitive deals because we had folks who were like, oh, but I've never seen something like this before. Well, to be clear, we spent 18 months before we launched the product on this very idea of like, when we launch this product, there's 1,000 sales recruiting agencies out there. How will we be able to compete? And we kind of isolated what would be the one or two things that we could really compete against, worked really hard to make those show up in the product, worked really hard on product marketing materials around it, trained our sales team to speak about them, trained our post-sales team to speak about them, and ultimately made I think it was Peter Thiel who once said, like, if you can't win the game the way it's played out, then change the rules of the game. And so, instead of trying to say, hey, we can help you get the best reps or the fastest, time to placement or whatever, which is what every other recruiting agency would say, we would just say, we are the first agency where you can trust that you'll get verified performance data on the rep. And in doing so, kind of stack the odds in our favor. And it worked for a little while. We got our first 100, 200, 300 customers through that. And then, yeah, you're right. It kind of started drying up, like enough people had heard the pitch, enough people had seen it, and we needed to unlock new ways in order to do that. I wonder how you think about, like, once you get to your first 50, first 100, maybe you're like a Series B company, Series C company, you have a little bit of a brand, you have a little bit of momentum, but not fully baked yet. What is that's kind of like the hardest part in some ways, the trough,
It is hard.
trying to get from like 2 to 20 or whatever. Like, how do you think about that? What are some of the things that you feel like work the best, or maybe some of the things that don't work well that you see a lot of people wasting their time on?
I think what happens at this stage, so unfortunately, this is the stage where there isn't any one quick answer.
Yeah.
And the thing that I feel I've seen these companies struggle with is qualification, because they're now somewhat blinded by that initial success, which feels like, I've got a product everybody wants. How is it that somebody would not want it? And so then you go spray and pray, and it doesn't work. So the next hard job you really have to do is to be the best ever at understanding how to qualify your ICP. What is the company size? Who is the buyer that would truly get what you're selling, and differentiation compared to anybody else? This hard work, most startups don't do. They are now so interested in getting to that massive number that they've signed up for. And now it's like, well, we're just going to do everything that we possibly can think of. But you actually have to slow down and be very, very regimented about figuring out your ICP, because once you figure that out, then you can start scaling again. So it's okay to slow down a little bit and know what the ICP truly is. That can scale without the founder in the room, without the thought leadership impact. You just have to be doing hardcore pain identification and showing the solution. So this is back to all the fundamentals of selling. But the biggest mistake that I see is that lack of qualification. It's just you're so much in love with your product, you don't realize that you're not doing that part of the work.
When you say qualification, just so I make sure I understand, are you saying that like you're asking the right questions up front to disqualify companies that might otherwise seem to be a good fit, but for some common reasons don't seem to convert very well? Is that what you mean, or do you mean something else?
Yes, that's what I mean. It's find the right companies. They may look like they need it, but there's a reason your product has a value and it will apply only to, it could be the size of the company, it could be the industry, could be the persona that is going to understand the value that you bring uniquely. And you just have to do that very, very fine-tuned work to get to the next stage. Eventually you're going to get to all the big companies, but that may not necessarily be the next thing that you're getting into. So it takes evolution and hard work to identify the ICP that you can now sell at somewhat of a scaled model, not you in the room everywhere.
Yep, that totally makes sense. Well, this is so much fun. I honestly could do like 2 more hours of this with you, but I want to be respectful of your time and of our calendar. I will twist your arm to try to have you come back and do this with me again in a couple months, because I want to actually spend so much more time diving into a bunch of the things that we talked about. But before we go, we've got our final kind of lightning round. End with some fun questions that I've got for you. So I'm gonna go through these and get your instinctual answers. So maybe the first question I have is, from pop culture, what fictional character do you think would make a great salesperson? No, you can't pick like, someone from Glengarry Glen Ross or something. You got to pick a
No?
real
Okay.
fictional character. Who do you think would be an amazing salesperson, and why?
Okay, I'll give you my answer. And it's based because I am a book nerd. I love fantasy. And it'll be an answer that you wouldn't expect to hear because I think most people will give you a male response. This is a female. This person has intelligence and PhD, persistence, heart, and desire to win, and is Hermione Granger from Harry Potter. I think she is going to be an effing amazing salesperson if she wanted to be.
Interesting. Interesting. The thing I think about with Hermione, I mean, obviously she's like the smartest character in the book, is that she seems to have a difficult time making friends. She seems to like be socially off-putting with her like, specific ways, but channel that in the right way, and I bet she could like impress the crap out of a lot of customers, huh? Is that kind of what you're going after?
I don't. So here's another controversial take. I don't know that the sales reps that are most successful are just simply good at making friends.
Hmm.
They're great at gaining trust because they know their stuff and
Hmm.
they know how to help you. And I think Hermione knows her stuff. She'll figure out what else she needs to know. She'll gain your trust because you know she's the best at what she does. And then you'll trust her when you give her that, sign on the dotted line that she's going to come through for you. That's the best sales rep I know.
That I love that answer. Um, okay, so outside of the workplace or some professional context, when is one time that you've used your prodigious sales talent in order to score yourself a great benefit or get yourself out of a tricky situation?
Oh man, I don't have great answers for you. I try my sales superpowers on my kids and completely fail. I've tried it in other places. My parents completely fail. No, I'm still learning that one, Sahil.
Oh, come on. Now you can't you're not getting off the hook. You got to tell me you're telling me that you have never been able to flex your sales muscle in any situation in which you were able to, or maybe you're just doing it so well that you're like forgetting the moments in which it works and you only remember the failures like any good salesperson.
I just don't want to admit it. I use it for I use it for stupid stuff like getting restaurant reservations and getting, the best room at the hotel, but it feels so terrible. I don't want to admit it.
Oh, come on. What do you mean you don't want to admit it? Sales is a superpower. And we if we have to deal with all of the crap of like, being labeled as a salesperson and whatever, then at the very least, we should be able to speak freely about our ability to leverage the skill to personal benefit. I would say my favorite is I convinced the airline hostess for our honeymoon to give my wife and I free upgrade to first class on Emirates, flying from SF to Dubai.
Wow, you
It,
should tell me that trick.
it was just, showed up really eager, beaver, excited, told them this whole story, asked if we could upgrade. They told us yes. They said it was, $7,000 per seat. And then we looked crestfallen and said, we can't afford it, unfortunately. And then we walked away looking sad. And then when we got to the ticket counter and we scanned the ticket, they were like, oh, can you come with us? And they like pulled us to the side and they had upgraded us to first class and the captain
Oh,
came and
that is
whatever. So
lovely.
just gave them an opportunity. One of the things I've learned is that people really want to be a hero. You just have to give them a chance to do it. Everybody
That's a
wants to
great
be
code.
Superman. Okay.
That's a great
How
code.
about this one? Best advice that someone gave you in your career that you don't hear repeated much these days.
Oh, best advice. I think the best advice, it's probably repeated. The best advice I was given was if something seems really hard and nobody wants to do it, you should go sign up for it because that's got so much value attached to it. And that's basically been my no straight line to a career outcome advice that I've been using. And I learned a lot from it. I don't know that people look for that anymore. They're looking for the easiest path out, and it doesn't necessarily serve you in the long run
Can I just double click? Why do you think that's such important advice?
because it really challenges you to grow. There's your growth mindset coming into play. And usually the things that are really hard have high value. Nobody, if it was easy to do, people would have done it, but they are hard and people don't want to sign up. But if you do, and because you're creative and curious and an owner of outcomes, you're going to figure out the answer. I think there's so much value you're creating, and I'm all about value creation. So,
I love that answer. That was such a good one. I absolutely love it. Sign up for the things that nobody else is willing to sign up for is amazing. Jason Lemkin actually wrote about this recently. He said, when you're the CEO and you ask someone, you basically have a really hard project and you say, okay, who wants to own it? And nobody raises their hand. If you're the one person who raises your hand in that moment, it says much more about who you are as a person than it does anything else. It just like what is it that compels someone to raise their hand when they know the project is hard and it's going to be annoying and whatever, but they are still willing to do it. It just speaks to your character and your mindset towards life, and I think it's a really really powerful one. I love that. Um, and then the last and easiest question of all, which is I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that have follow up questions that want to ping you, that would like to get some advice from you or ask you something. What is the best way to get a hold of you?
usually LinkedIn is the best one. I'm fairly responsive on LinkedIn.
Okay, amazing. We will drop a link to your LinkedIn profile then in the description, and I'll have it populate here as well so that people can just copy it. So, thanks to the magic of podcast editing. All right, Sangeeta, thank you so much for your time. This was such a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I really hope that I get an opportunity to continue this with you in a few months because I feel like we just scratched the surface, and there's so much to talk about with you.
Thanks for having me, Sahil. I really, truly enjoyed it as well. I look forward to more.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.